Today we are going to be doing Unit 3, Lesson 4, which is linear inequality word problems. We slightly touched on this last semester, but we did not focus on two variable linear inequality word problems. What I do want you to do, though, is to jot down some of our translation notes from last semester. What I did was at the very bottom of my paper, I wrote these reminders, okay? Greater than or equal to, in a word problem, you would see at least or no less than. The greater than symbol would just be more than. The less than or equal to, in a word problem, you would see at most or no more than. And then, of course, less than is just less than. So go ahead and add those to the bottom of your paper. And then what we're going to very quickly work through today are just 7 examples. So let's go start with number 1. Julie has $500 in a savings account at the beginning of the summer. So that will be her B. She wants to have at least, if you refer to the bottom of your paper, that would be greater than or equal to $200. And that's going to be the total. Okay. She is going to withdraw. So if you're taking money out, withdrawal means minus $25 each week for food, clothes, and movie tickets. So let's translate this and write an official equation. And I can even just write it in the order that they gave it to me. So 500 minus 25, and that each week, that's my X variable. And then she wants to have at least $200. So that is my translated equation. And this is a one variable inequality word problem. We're going to do 2 examples of one variable, and then we'll do 2 examples that have both variables. All right. So what we need to do now is to solve this equation and figure out what is the value of X. So I'm going to start by subtracting this 500 from both sides. And that's going to give me a negative 300 here and bring down the negative 25x. And now divide both sides by negative 25. 300 divided by 25 is 12, and bring down my x. And then I did need to remember one thing right here. I have just divided by a negative number, so I do need to apply the golden rule. Remember, the golden rule says if you multiply or divide by a negative number, then you rotate the inequality for your final answer. All right, now let's do the second part of this problem. It asks me for the possible values of the domain. So remember, domain are the X values. So I need to go back up to my original word problem, and I need to decide which part of the word problem represents the X values. And that would be the each week are my X values, okay? It's the information that comes right after the slope. So the possible values. Well, let's see. So it's going to take 12 weeks or less. 12 weeks or less. So before she runs out of money. I'm sorry, until she has $200 in the account, and then she doesn't want to go lower than 200. So this value here tells me that it could be 0 weeks, 1, 2, and then all the way up to 12. It cannot be negative 1 weeks because we can't go back in time. So we really need to think about in real life situations what numbers are possible. Okay. So we have 0 to 12. And here's how the proper way to write that is. It would be 0 to 12, okay? The x values could be anywhere that are greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 12. That's the proper way to write my domain. Awesome. So that's example 1. I want you now to pause the video and I want you to try to translate example number 2. And then when you come back, I will have shown my work for my annotations, and then I will have translated it. So go ahead, pause your video and give it a try. All right, so I have annotated my word problem as well as translated into any solvable inequality. So if there are any questions that you have at this moment in time, please raise your hand and ask me, and I'll come try to help you. Now, those of you who feel like you're good to go, I want you to pause the video again. Go ahead and solve this inequality. You are allowed to use your calculator if you would like to help you with the decimals. All right, so we have gone ahead and we've solved this, and we got that the number of braids that she can afford to purchase are less than or equal to 12.69. But I do want to talk about this 0.69 for just a second. We are talking about braids. Okay, so if I go to a salon and I pay for braids, how often do you think I would ask her to just keep braiding and braiding until we get about, 2/3 of the way there, and then go ahead and stop because I can't afford for you to finish that braid? That just wouldn't happen. So we need to just say less than or equal to 12 braids because she's not going to pay for a portion. All right. So we want whole numbers here. And so that is really going to help us understand when we are talking about our domain, what we can use here. So our domain is the x values, and the domain is the number of braids that she can buy. Number of braids. And we just found out that it's less than or equal to 12. So the way that I write my domain is going to be exactly the way that I wrote it in example number 1. She can possibly pay for 0 braids and decide to spend her $10 on something else, or she can purchase at most 12 braids and then anything in between. And so that's the appropriate way to write my domain. That is called a compound inequality when it has 3 different parts to it. You'll learn a lot more about compound inequalities later in your math courses. But as far as Math 1 is concerned, we just not need to look at it and understand what it means. We're not actually solving anything with it yet. All right, let's go look at example 3. So I'm going to do 3, and then I'm going to ask you to do number 4 on your own. Okay? Mrs. Crawford is ordering pizzas and breadsticks for the school birthday party, and she has a budget of $81, but no more than that. An order of breadsticks costs $7 and a pepperoni pizza costs $13. So I'm going to stop right there, and my job is to do the translating. So I know that she has a budget of $80, but no more than that. So that's going to be less than or equal to 81. So let's go ahead and just put that less than or equal to $81. Okay. An order of breadsticks will cost me $7. So $7 for breadsticks. And a pepperoni pizza will cost me $13. So plus 13 for a pizza. This equation, the information provided to me was in standard form. So it's important to remember how to translate equations from standard form. So what our job is now is to identify the domain and all the possible values of the domain. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, and then I gave you the hint, right? Let's find the x-intercept. That's my hint. So the b is actually would be the x value, and the p would be the y value if I had used x and y. So to find the x-intercept, I need to allow the y value to equal 0, and then I need to solve that. So I'm going to have 7b plus 13 times 0. So plug in the 0 for your y, and that's going to be less than or equal to 81. All right. So if she does not buy any pizzas, that'll cost her $0. If all she buys is breadsticks, how many can she buy? And the answer is 81 divided by 7 is going to give me 11.6. But again, I want us to think about, can we buy half an order of breadsticks? Usually not. So we're going to say that our X values, or our B values, in this case breadsticks, she can buy either 0 breadsticks, at the least 0, or at the most she can buy is 11. Okay? So those are the possible numbers of breadsticks that she can buy. Our job next is to figure out how many possible pizzas could she buy in all. So when we're trying to identify the range, I want you to remember that this is where the X value is going to equal 0. I want to find the Y, so I keep the Y and make the other variable a 0. So I'm going to have 7 times 0 plus 13 pizzas is less than or equal to $81. And I'm going to plug in my 0 for my X. So if she does not buy any breadsticks, that would be 0. So I've got 13p is less than 81. Let's divide by 13. And so p is less than or equal to 6.23 when I type that into my calculator. And again, we're not going to buy a partial pizza. So at least she can buy 0 pizzas. At most, she can buy 6 pizzas. And everything in between. So I add the less than or equal to's there. So that is my domain, and that is my range. Great. So that was the most involved problem so far with our inequalities word problems. What I want you to do now is I'm going to scroll back up so that you can see the top part of number 4. So I want you just to do part 1. I want you to read this word problem, do your annotations, and then translate it into a word problem. So pause the video while you do that. All right, I have underlined where I got my 1R from. So I'm using R to represent a regular barrette, R for regular, and I'm using a D to represent my deluxe barrette. So Allie has this ribbon to make these hair barrettes. She has a total of 64 yards of ribbon. So if that's all she has, she can use less than that or equal to 64, but no more. And so that is my equation. Now, what I want you to do is pause your video again, and I want you to try to identify the domain. Remember, that is, you're finding the x-intercept okay? R would be our x in this case. And so we're going to plug in for our y equals 0. All right, so I've gone ahead and I did the work to find my possible domain. 1r is less than or equal to 64. I didn't really have to do any work for that. So the possible yards of ribbon that Allie could use with making a regular hair bow are anywhere from 0 to 64 yards. All right, because they only require 1 yard each. So she could possibly make 64 of those regular barrettes. Now I want you to try to do the exact same thing with the range. Again, remember, for the range, the x equals 0, and we're trying to find the y-intercept. So go ahead and pause the video while you do that. All right, so I have found that with the deluxe barrettes, she can make anywhere from 0 deluxe barrettes to 16 with her 64 yards of ribbon. Let's go take a look at our 3 EOC examples, and then we're going to be finished with today's lesson. So EOC example number 1, which scenario could be represented and modeled by this graph? Okay, so let's go through, and the first thing that I'm going to recommend that you do is decide what is the equation of this graph. So that's going to be my first step. What is the equation? Okay, so I can see right here that my y-intercept is 5. So b equals 5. The shading is less than my y-intercept, and I have a solid line. So I know that my inequality will be less than or equal to. And then how would I find my slope? Let's take a look at this. I would say go down 2 over 1, and there's a really good point there. So my slope is negative 2 over 1. All right. So the equation that I would have for this is y is less than or equal to negative 2x plus 5. So that's what I want to keep in mind when I start translating all of these scenarios over here. Okay. So let's start with A. What we want to do now, my step 2, would be to translate all of my answer choices. So I'm going to try to translate just answer choice A, and I'm going to have you do B, C, and D, okay? But let's do the first one together. The number of pounds of apples, Y, so Y, minus 2 times the number of oranges. So minus 2x is at most. At most is less than or equal to. So less than or equal to 5. All right, so I've done part A. I want you to go through and translate B, C, and D. Come back. We've translated B, C, and D. Take just a minute to make sure that what you've translated is the same thing that I've translated. Okay, when they say half, of course, we've got to use 1/2. All right. I'm also going to make a note for myself that y equals apples, just so that I don't forget, and that x is oranges. It's also always important to remember what your variables are representing. Okay, so none of these are actually in the proper order that they need to be in for me to identify, one, is the slope negative 2, and second, is the y-intercept 5, okay? I see all these 5s here, so I'm assuming that they all have a proper y-intercept of 5. So we really need to pay attention to the slope, okay? So what we're going to need to do for every single one of these is to solve them and get the y by itself. So for The very first option A, I would need to add 2x to both sides, add 2x. So the final equation I would get for that is y is less than or equal to 2x plus 5. And I can see that my slope does not match because it's a positive slope. So it's not going to be A based on the slope. If I did B, all I'm going to be doing is adding 1/2. So 1/2 x is not the same as a -2 either. So that eliminates option B. I'm going to assume that D is also not correct because it's a fraction. Let us just try C. If I subtract this 2x from both sides, it's clearly going to equal y is less than or equal to -2x plus 5, which is what matches this equation right here. So that is our first EOC example. Let's take a look at the second one. Students are ordering a flower arrangement. She can choose any combination of roses and carnations for her flower arrangement, and she does not want to spend more than $30. So I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to translate no more than 30. So what that means is she could spend equal to $30. So I'm looking for less than or equal to $30. And A does not have that, and neither does C. So those are both out. Okay, now I'm ready to translate the rest of it. If roses cost $3 each, that's the first piece of information they gave me. So that's got to be my 3x. And option B is what has the 3x in it. So really I already know my answer and I haven't even finished translating it, but it's not that hard to finish it up. Carnations cost $2 each, so it'd be 2y, and that also has the 2y. So my answer choice, B, is what I'm looking for. Okay, that one was really quick. And then let's do this very last one. Actually, I want you to do this last one. I want you to give it a try. It is still in standard form, so it's really similar to number 2, except that it's a tiny bit tricky because there's a percentage there. So I just want to see how you handle that. So go ahead, pause the video, and try number 3. All right, so welcome back. Hopefully you were able to at least get this much. I know that that percentage was a little tricky, so I saved it so I could do it with you. So lower deck tickets are 42 each, so that's pretty clearly just 42x. They can buy no more than $800 worth of tickets, so less than or equal to 800. And now let's talk about our Y value. The upper deck seats cost 75%. Let me switch to blue. 75% the cost of the lower deck tickets. Well, I know that the lower deck tickets cost $42. So that's what I'm going to get for my Y value. 75% of the cost means to multiply them together. And so if I just use my calculator to multiply these two things together, I'm going to get 31.5, which the only one that has both the less than or equal to and the 31.5y is option B. Okay, so that is my final answer. Great job. So what you're going to do now is you're going to go onto Google Classroom and complete the assignment that I posted there under this video. All right, until next time.